Welcome to the IVM Podcast Network.
Hey, you're listening to IVM Likes. It is our show, Indus Fox Media's podcast, where we, as a podcasting company, recommend things that you should totally check out, stuff that we really like. I'm May, and I'm your host, and I've got with me Sharanya and Amit.
Hey.
So every week, we're trying to recommend some form of media. We've started out with a movie, a book, and a TV show. That's what we did with our first episode. And we're going to do the same thing today. We might switch it around. We might recommend podcasts.
Yeah.
We might
Video games.
Video games. A bar of chocolate that, I don't know.
That's not really media.
I got
excited.
the label is so interesting.
Yeah.
You know?
And it's so pretty that you think, I want my face to be on this.
Yeah.
Basically, we recommend stuff.
We'll recommend
Yeah,
stuff.
recommend
All right, so
stuff
then I guess if we're
to
going to
do with your
recommend
free
stuff,
time.
then we can recommend chocolates too.
Yay. I'm happy now.
I feel like it should take a significant amount of your time. It should be like recreational.
You
Not
can-
Can I tell you something?
Not,
What if
Have
you
you
have
had-
lots
have
of
you ever-
chocolate?
Oh, boss, have you ever tried my chocolate recommendation for this episode? Have you guys tried Theobromma's Dense Loaf?
yes, I have.
That stuff
I've
is my kryptonite. Okay, it's crazy good. So every week, one of us is going to recommend something. So this week, I'm recommending a book. Amit is recommending a TV show, and Shania, you're recommending a movie. So why don't we kick off with you, Shania? What's the film that you're recommending?
Sure. I'm recommending this movie called What We Do in the Shadows, which is written by Jermaine Clement of Flight of the Conchords and
Whoa.
Taika Waititi. It's a movie made in New Zealand. It's a 2014 release. It's absolutely one of the funniest mockumentaries I have ever seen.
That's your thing, is it? Mockumentaries?
Oh, no, actually, that's... No, it's not. That's kind
This
of
is turning out to be a trend, my friend.
I can't find a mockumentary book, I'm sure, for next time. That's too much pressure.
I wouldn't put it past you right now.
So what we do in the shadows is about these vampires who live in like this old house in New Zealand, and they're really old. Obviously, they're like 8,000 years old or like 130 years old, which are the fairly younger zombies.
Vampires.
Zombies and vampires. I'm not really sure about the difference, guys.
They're significant.
It's
difference.
subtle
No, it's
differences,
not
but
subtle at all. Vampires drink blood. Zombies are the living dead.
Yeah, but they
By
also
zombies.
eat people.
They eat people.
There's
but-
commonalities there. I'm not saying that
No,
they're like...
I think
think
the
so.
blood is
Draft-
the common bit.
No, I mean there's intelligence.
Are
right?
vampires not undead as well?
No, but there's intelligence, right? The zombies are not really intelligent.
No, they're not.
Oh, right,
They're sort of
right,
like,
right.
I eat you.
Vampires-
It's like
That
the
makes
Hulk
sense.
Yeah.
versus like...
Yeah, got it. So on this movie, basically, these vampires are trying to like adjust to 21st century, modern technology, and they like to go out and party and shit, but they don't want like to people to know that they're vampires, so they can't like if they want to go out and party to like get a victim or whatever.
Right.
They have no reflections, so they have no way of telling what they look like, so they have to like sketch it out for each other. It's 4 roommates who live in the house, and then it's genuinely like one of those, it's a very mundane kind of mockumentary where these guys are like vampires, but one of them is not doing the dishes anymore, and we don't know how to vacuum this house. There's skeletons everywhere, guys. It's like if you're going to bring a victim over and drink their blood, at least put some papers down. My couch is now red. That kind of stuff. Why I want to talk about this is basically, of course, it's really funny and you should watch it. But they're also coming out with 2 sequels. One is a television sequel, which is a TV show they're doing based on 2 like cops that have like a very tiny role in the movie. So these cops come over one time because they hear like there's some disturbance in the house and they want to check if like what's happening in this house. So these guys have to pretend that they're just regular people who live in this house. And the cops are so oblivious to like the blood and stuff. They're just like, guys, wait, that's a safety hazard. You can't keep fire next to a plug point. So the cops are getting a show, like a separate TV show. And there's a movie sequel called Werewolves. So vampires hate werewolves,
Right.
of
Yeah,
course.
yeah.
So in the movie, at some point when the vampires get out to party, they run into like a gang of like werewolves,
Right.
who are of course run by the guy from Flight of the Conchords. They are Murray, who plays their agent. He's the werewolf's head, and he's very clear about his rules. You cannot swear because they are werewolves, not swearwolves.
Oh, best joke for today.
So the mockumentary is basically following this group of vampires, because there's a big event at the end of the month, which is the Unholy Masquerade, where all like the demons of the night come together to have fun and party. And only the camera crew is human. Okay, and now the vampires really have to tell like all of the other friends that we're going to bring some humans, and that's against the rules. And that's what the movie basically follows. There's also one really great bit where they transform this new vampire called Nick, who's so happy with the flying around, that he keeps telling everybody, I'm a vampire, guys. Which of course attracts some vampire hunters, and then, some shit goes down in the house. It's pretty dark, guys.
Yeah.
But the four of them, so one of the vampires who's telling you the story is this guy called Viago. He's almost 400 years old, 387. He's like this really sincere vampire who loves his friends. He wants to he has usual, roommate meetings.
Is he the Ted Mosby of vampires?
I think that's a good way to put it. But he does have, so it's so sincere because he basically he's like a European vampire, and he came to New Zealand because he fell in love with this girl. And so his help at that time was trying to ship him also to New Zealand to meet her, but he put a wrong postage stamp, and Viago got there 18 months later, and the girl had met somebody else. But then that guy died, and now they're together. Of course, she's 96 years old. But he's 379 years old, and most people call him a cradle snatcher. That's the whole joke, because she's so old as well.
Oh my God.
And then there's Deacon, who's Jermaine, who's like this... he used to be this sexy dude, but like a really bad breakup really killed him, and now he's lost all his power because of his vampire girlfriend was the worst. They call her the Beast.
Okay.
And there's the youngest one who is about 136 years old. He's the real sexy one, basically. He's just he's a rebel in the group. He does all these antics where he'll bring people over, and he won't just go for the regular biting. He'll do some he'll trick them into it. He has movie references to bait victims.
Okay.
And then there's Peter, who's 8,000 years old, and he basically just lives in his coffin all the time. It's a really well thought out world.
That's kind of cool.
That's what I love about this kind of stuff, right? Yeah. If there's good world building, now then this stuff works.
I know,
right?
and it's nice because you feel like you get involved in it, and you really get into it, all the nitty gritty of it.
There's nothing more fun than trying to poke a hole at something and then finding that there's no hole. That's really a lot.
It's
of
great
fun.
when you find no hole. That's going to be the quote of the episode.
Okay.
What's really also fun about it, so basically the new vampire that's new to their world called Nick has this friend called Stu. And Stu's like a regular human being who comes over and starts to teach them the internet or how to text. Okay. And they're so amazed because they watch the sunrise on YouTube, and they're so happy because they can never see a sunrise in real life because vampires can't handle light. But what's great about the story is that Stu apparently in real life is just an IT guy on the show or on the set.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they were like, hey, we should get Stu on to be a part of this movie. Because he was a roommate of the director, right. So he was helping out on the set, and they were like, you should do this role. So he thought it was a 20-second bit where he just had to sit in the back and sip coffee or something, because they kept giving him more and more lines. And he's the only human who survives because the vampires love him, because Stu's a really nice guy, guys.
Aww.
Which is really great. And he teaches them how to text, so then they start prank texting each other. Hey, there's a crucifix behind you, that kind of stuff. Which I thought was great. And then when they go to the unholy masquerade, one of the other vampires asks Stu, hey, what do you do? And Stu's like, I'm a software analyst. And it's actually true.
That's so good.
That's just, you should watch it because the sequel's coming out, and it's it's so witty, it's written so well. If you like Flight of the Conchords, it's that kind of comedy. It's really self-aware,
right.
And just
quite absurdist,
so funny. If you haven't watched it yet, What We Do in the Shadows is what you should watch for sure. The director, by the way, Taika, is also now directing the new Thor movie in 2017.
Okay.
So I am recommending a book, and it's a book I've read a little while ago. And I actually interviewed the author. She's a journalist from London. Her name is Monisha Rajesh. She's originally, I think, her family's from Chennai, but she's second generation immigrant. And she wrote this book called Around India in 80 Trains. So she takes, India has one of the largest railway networks in the world. And she decides to do this thing where she takes 80 trains all across India. And it's quite fascinating. She travels 24,855 miles, which is the circumference of the Earth, by the way.
Okay.
She reaches the south, the north, the east, the west, and she goes on some. I really enjoyed this book because I realized there's very little I know about the railway. I've taken trains many times, commuter trains,
Right.
everything. And she does everything. She does like the smaller commuter trains within the city, and she does things like the Deccan Queen, which is from Mumbai to Pune. And there's so many things I didn't know. Like for example, the Deccan Queen was the first ladies only car that it had. First one to have a diner. It was the first super fast. So, and it just recently I found out this year it celebrated the 87th anniversary, which is lovely. So she's taken everything, like Palace on Wheels.
The Palace on Wheels. Okay, sorry. Deccan Queen is different. I was thinking, was that the Palace on Wheels thing?
No,
Okay,
Palace on Wheels, Maharaja Express, the Durantos, the Shatabdis. And the one that I found particularly interesting in this book was that India has the world's first hospital train called... it's called Lifeline Express or Jeevan Rekha Express.
Never heard of that.
I
did not even know that. Yeah.
I know. Even I didn't till I read the book.
So 1 second. What is a hospital train? Is it
I'm
like...
going to explain it to you right now. I haven't finished my sentence. So this is the world's first hospital train, and it started in 1991, and it's run by not just the Indian Railways, but there's a lot of support from this UK NGO called Impact India Foundation, Impact UK. And they've completed like 120 projects, and what they do is they go to really rural and inaccessible areas within India where they provide medical services where it's not available. So for example, in the book, she witnesses like an orthopedic surgery inside the train. So what they do is in the train, their whole job is that they go to these like rural areas. They what do you call it? Halt the train there, and they do like on the spot like diagnostic.
Okay. Wow.
They do surgeries, they do treatments, and within the train they have like 2 surgical operating theaters, a recovery room, power generators, a pantry car, storage for their medical supplies, accommodation for the staff. And they also have a dental unit, a laboratory, an x-ray unit, and ophthalmologic testing room. I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
Okay.
So it's actually really fascinating.
So it's like actually a hospital.
It's an actual hospital
Yeah.
on wheels, and it's been running since 1991, and it's the world's first hospital train. India had that.
Okay.
So we have quite a fascinating
it still
railway
runs,
network.
and,
It
like,
still
people
runs.
still use it?
So when she got it, it was in Madhya Pradesh at the time, but they do projects all across. So they
Okay.
basically go
Go
and
to
they-
different places.
Yeah.
and they do everything from cataract surgeries to cleft lip
Right.
to she experienced an orthopedic surgery where something happened to someone's leg or something, and it was so fascinating. So they basically go around doing this medical service, and they help support other like government like medical networks. And so I didn't even know this about India, and I'm telling you, this book, she writes really beautifully. She's a journalist herself, so she is a really good writer. And I'd interviewed her when I was working at Radio 1, and she was really nice. She actually talks about how, I mean, she's second-generation immigrant. She comes back to India, and even though it's her motherland, she said, India's the only place I feel like a foreigner. And I get that. So, and she talks about everything. So it's not just like her talking about the trains. It's also her journey of herself and what she goes through. Because India is also not an easy place.
No, it's not
And it's
easy.
the railway, guys.
No,
Yeah,
traveling
that's
in
true.
India is tough as hell.
Yeah.
It's tough. So what she goes through during that, she ends up, so like the Jules Verne book, right? She's accompanied by this photographer who she calls Passepartout, which is the character in Jules Verne book. And what she goes through with him, you know, I think there's one point where travel, I think, is the true test of any relationship.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think that even though she invited him to come along as her photographer, like I think they have a falling out, things get really dramatic. How she meets this like really cool guy when she's on that medical train and ends up having like this little thing with him. But all of it is not just about the trains, it's about her as well and her experience. So I like that. I like the little bit of both.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And it's not just like a slightly informative book, because more like a lot of travel books don't so much. It's not just about their
They're not
experience.
personal journeys.
Yeah, they're not really
Yeah.
personal journeys.
Guidebooks are not fun. Travelogues are.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I really enjoyed this book. She's a really good writer, and I did learn a lot about the Indian Railway in this book. So I would definitely recommend it. And if you want to check out her book or her website, it's really simple. It's 80trains.com.
All right. That sounds
Nice.
interesting as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
That sounds
So,
pretty cool.
Next, yes.
Wait, what was the name again?
Around India in 80
What
Trains.
is her name, the writer's name?
Monisha Rajesh.
Oh.
So next, we've got Amit with his TV show recommendation.
Sure. So yeah, I wanted to talk about a TV show which I really, really enjoy. It's one of my favorite shows that's come out in the last few years. It's called Person of Interest.
Oh, I've seen this one.
You have?
Yeah. I really enjoyed it.
Nice.
Jim
Yeah, it's
Caviezel,
really
right?
Jim Caviezel.
It's like one of those big shows I've completely missed out on.
So it's so actually the
Guys,
thing.
I actually watched this on a TV, okay? Actually on TV.
So do I. I watch it on television as well. I watch everything on TV. So this is a really awesome show, and actually, there's a reason probably why you missed it, because the show changed completely over this from what it started out as. Right? It started out as like this, like a normal standard procedural with a twist, like Elementary or House or any of these kinds of shows, which is like it's a something of the week kind of thing, and there's a slight twist to it.
Correct.
It started out like that. So I mean, like the premise of the show is you have a reclusive billionaire tech genius. There's a guy named Harold Finch, who's played by Michael Emerson, which a lot of people might remember from Lost.
Yeah.
The super creepy dude from
the super
Lost.
creepy dude from Lost. That's who it is. And so he invents an AI machine that scans pretty much all the data that exists in the U.S., right? I mean, like surveillance cameras, cell phones, emails, like just everything.
That is super creepy.
It is super creepy. And basically it analyzes all of the data, and analyzing it then is able to predict threats. Somebody's going to get killed, or somebody's about to kill somebody. So the U.S. government wants this to basically neutralize terrorist threats. That's their idea, right? Now, what happens is that the way that he has set this up is that he doesn't get just the terrorist threats or the national security threats. He even finds out about personal murders. At least the machine does, right?
Okay.
But the government doesn't want to do this because, I mean, it's like you said, it's really creepy, right? This kind of surveillance, this kind of overt surveillance.
It's that whole idea of your own personal privacy versus your own personal safety.
Yeah, exactly. That's all part of that, right? So the idea that so they don't want to, if they started stopping every single murder that happened, domestic murders and stuff like that, people would figure out that there's something going on, right? So they basically categorize so they get these social security numbers,
right,
and they categorize them as relevant or non-relevant. So the relevant numbers are basically national security threats, and the irrelevant numbers are personal kind of things.
Okay.
And now, so Finch has a really tough time with this. He can't reconcile this idea that there are irrelevant people like that's which they're irrelevant,
right?
So he basically needs to find, so he wants to kind of do something about that. So the system he creates, so there's actually another interesting aspect to this. So he creates what's called a closed system, right? So the idea is that nobody knows what's happening inside, what the machine is thinking, how it's deciding, nobody knows that, because he's cognizant of this fact that it's really super creepy to have this kind of surveillance. So he's like, the machine does its own thing, it gives you a number. It spits out a number based on all of the surveillance and stuff that it does.
Yeah, so it's not like he can actually watch videos or look at an email.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
He just gets the threats at the end.
That's not exactly true, but that kind of is true. Okay. So that's what he set up for the government. So that the people in the government cannot actually see what's happening. They just get a social security number, and the thing is that they don't know. They just get a social security number, and they know there's something about this person. They don't know
if to investigate.
They have to investigate. They don't know if the person is going to commit an act or if the person is going to be a victim of an act.
Oh, okay.
So there's an actual investigation process required for it, right? So
that's strange if you don't know whether they're
or the
perpetrator.
Right?
So the idea is that you got to go in and you got to find out what's going on. We're just giving you a hint. Now find out what's up. Right, and so so that's what the government does, and he can't handle the idea that there are people the government are thinking is irrelevant, right? So he starts recruiting a team to kind of save the irrelevant people. So the first person he recruits is Jim Caviezel, John Reese. Basically, the name of the character is John Reese, played by Jim Caviezel. Basically, I call him Jesus Batman for this show because he played Jesus in The Passion of the Christ, and in this show, he pretty much plays Batman. So I call him Jesus Batman. But he starts out as like a homeless kind of guy, and he's hassled by a bunch of Russian gangsters, and then you find out that he's ex-CIA and ex-Special Forces because he pretty much destroys them in a fight. Then there are other characters who Finch also kind of brings along, right? So there is, so he has two police allies as well. There's Josh Carter, who's played by Taraji Henson from Empire. And there's Kevin Chapman, who you've probably seen like a billion things. Kevin Chapman is basically a corrupt cop. Taraji Henson plays the upright kind of police person. So this is a team that they start out with. As the years go on, they get a couple of other interesting people, like Amy Acker joins the team as a master hacker.
Okay.
And Sarah Shahi joins as so she's the equivalent of Jim Caviezel, but she works for the relevant numbers. So she works for the national security apparatus.
Oh, got it.
And then she kind of switches sides over to them at that. So they all basically become this team. And so what's really interesting about this show is it starts out as this number of the week procedural, right? You get a number, you find out what's going on, and then you kind of investigate, and that's your show. But it changes from that into something really, really intense and really amazing, right? There are so many conflicting ideas that come up in this show, right? Which you don't really realize that they're playing against each other. So on the one hand, these people are helping people, right? So they're the good guys. But the kind of surveillance they use to do the investigation, they basically hack into anybody's cell phone, they'll clone
They're
the phone.
crossing some
they'll find
serious lines.
Exactly. They're doing whatever the hell they want. But at the same time, they're the good guys. You know that they're doing something because they're trying to commit a murder. So what is the degree that you want to allow
Where's the
them?
line? Where do you draw the line?
So that's an interesting aspect. Since they never know if the person who they're looking at is a victim or a perpetrator, it can cause some really, really crazy surprises.
Correct.
One of the most memorable characters, recurring characters on this show, is a guy who was introduced as a victim, and they thought he was a victim, and they're running around trying to save him. And at the end of the show, you find out that this guy is actually the biggest mafia don in the city.
Oh, wow.
my God.
Yeah, so
Awesome.
you get all of these kinds of
Spoiler alert! Too late, guys.
Well, I think I covered it enough so that you wouldn't really figure out that it's a spoiler, because they run around protecting people all over the city in pretty much every other episode. And that's pretty much all I told you guys, except for that he turns out to be a mafia don at the end. Other thing it does is it gets really existential in some ways, right? Especially towards the later years when the AI starts becoming a character in and of itself.
Right.
The artificial intelligence, which we call the machine, that starts displaying its personality. And that really becomes, then at that point in time, you got to start asking yourself, if a machine is able to learn, if it is able to become, if it's able to reinvent itself constantly, what is humanity? And what is, to what degree is this, can you treat this machine like a machine anymore?
Yeah. How do you trust the machine anyway?
How do you trust the machine? That becomes one, that's also something you played with all the time, right? You don't know how because that machine is closed. You don't know what's going on inside that machine. You just know that he's giving you numbers.
So this is there's this podcast recommendation, guys, from a podcast company. It is called The Infinite Monkey Cage.
Okay.
And it's hosted by Brian Cox, who's a physicist, and this comedian who, I don't know why right now, but I can't remember his name. And in every episode, they pick a topic and they sort of break it down. And one of them was artificial intelligence. And they looked at it. And it was really funny because at one point, you want to understand whether artificial intelligence, like you said, it keeps and continues to reinvent itself. But what makes you human is error, that you learn from your mistakes, right? And so there's a comedian, she's so funny. She actually says, she's like, well, my husband makes mistakes all the time. He never takes the trash out. And things like that. That's what it means to be human. Okay, that is it. And it's funny, but to try to understand. So if you make if artificial intelligence is so this is the idea of it being perfect. It never makes any mistakes. It always like when we're doing when we're understanding self-driving cars, you're trying to make it more and more perfect.
No, but I don't think that that's the case at all. That artificial intelligence does not make errors, right? I mean, because
no, not that. In the sense that human error is different from
a machine breakdown.
Okay, of course.
There's a very subtle difference. So understanding that how. The errors that we're talking about with technology is very different from human errors. So it was trying to find that fine line of what is it to be human and what is trying to break down what artificial intelligence is.
That's what I find so interesting about shows like this, right? I find artificial intelligence just fascinating in general, right? But one of the reasons that I really love the show is it asks these kind of really tough questions, and they put them in situations, right, where these questions kind of come up in a very kind of immediate way, right? I mean, all right, this is a mildish spoiler. So one of the things that happens in this show is Finch deliberately cripples the machine, right? Harold Finch, the guy, the main guy. He deliberately cripples the machine by making it lose its memory every night because he doesn't want it to get too far ahead. Now, what is the ethics of a situation like that? Okay, I mean, this is a self-learning machine, right? He has created a machine which is basically able to learn stuff on its own, but every night he destroys its memory so that it starts to scratch and starts from the beginning again. So what are the ethics of something like that?
Wait, I didn't get why he does that.
He does that because he doesn't want the machine to get too far ahead, right? He doesn't want it to learn too much.
Okay.
You're worried about the singularity. You're worried about things like that, where the machine then starts making decisions on behalf of humanity.
Okay.
So you have to so he destroys the machine every night, essentially, and basically formats it. So what are the ethics of something like that?
Wait, who's the person of interest, guys?
The person of interest is the
That
number.
social security number
number.
that you get?
The number is the
The
person of
number.
interest.
The number is the person of interest.
Who's the person? Kim, how am I solving this mystery?
Should be a clear answer. That guy.
That guy.
Actually, just two more things I should mention about this show, right? One is it is probably the best action show that's ever been on television. The action sequences in this show are ridiculous. And the way they use music in this show is insanely amazing. They do these long montages which are set over different songs. So they did one montage set over I'm Afraid of Americans by David Bowie. They did another one set over a version of Hurt by Johnny Cash. And I mean, like, seriously, that one is after the death of a major character. And I've shown that video to people without having them any context, and they're all like, holy crap, that looks amazing. I gotta watch this show.
Yeah. So we have recommended a book, a film, and a TV show. But the book I recommended is Around India in 80 Trains by Monisha Rajesh. And the TV show recommended by Amit is Person of Interest. And we have a film called What We Do in the Shadows that's suggested by Sharanya. So every week we'll be suggesting the things that we like and stuff you should totally check out. It might be a chocolate bar this week. It might be a song next week.
A song is nice. An album.
An album.
A whole album.
Yeah.
A whole album.
Yeah.
Not just one song.
Yeah.
We'll give you more.
I'll find a mock album, guys.
Mock album,
This
mock
is
book.
Final
It's
Tap.
your challenge.
You can record you can review that this is Final Tap album.
That's so good. Well, guys, thank you so much. This was really good. We'll see you next week.
Hey man, just help me out, man. I need some podcast, man. I haven't had a fix in a week. Just need some.
Don't you worry about it. I got podcast galore for you, man. Just go to ivmpodcast.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Thanks, man. I'm gonna check it out.